Welcome to the Peace of Living podcast. We're your hosts, Allison
and Jason,
and we're happy to be back with you for 2 weeks in a row, which is a major accomplishment for us these days. I feel like we're finally back into a good rhythm. I feel like we need to give just a quick update on our lives. Last episode was kind of heavy and had several of you very kindly reached out to us and asked if we were doing okay and just expressed your sympathies. And we wanted to thank you so much for that. It really does mean the world when you reach out, and especially, when we are going through tough times. And I will say, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Jason, that there is a marked difference this week from last week.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with things being taken care of medically that have allowed us to move past where we were. Thank goodness. We're finally pretty well resolved with everything that's going on in a physical sense. But I do think that a large portion of that too is just from prayers from you, from those of you who've been listening and who have been, we can feel it. I maintain this all the time. I know when people are praying for me because I feel that difference. So we hope that this episode and this podcast at large is just some small way of giving back and saying thank you. We hope that this helps you in the way that you have helped us and been such a blessing to us in our lives.
Yeah. I want to say that too. Just thank you very, very much. And like Allie, had many people reach out, and we really do believe in the power of prayer. And we really do, like we've talked about on here before, we're just so grateful to be just here for each other, we're grateful for you, but we're also grateful to be a part of your lives as well. And it's just so cool how God's just put us with each other as brothers and sisters. And so, just thanks for letting us be a part of your lives as well. There's strength on both sides, right? Going through it and then also helping. And it's really great.
Well, and honestly, like this podcast, I think has blessed you and me probably more than anybody because it's given us a chance to really focus on Jesus first and foremost, but also as a kind of a wonderful side effect of that is that it's connected us deeper to people in our lives and in our own families. Really, I think we've had more meaningful conversations about things, and I don't know. I'm grateful for it. And we just want to recommit to you that we're going to keep coming and showing up as long as you're willing to keep listening to us. So thank you for being here for another episode. And tonight's episode has a very funny origin story because like we've shared before, we don't always know what we're going to talk about on the podcast, sometimes even until like right up before we're going to record. And that's just because life is crazy and we're going all sorts of different directions. And it's not for a lack of things to talk about. It's usually just honing in on what we want to discuss. And I joked with Jason because my parents very kindly took the kids for us this afternoon so that we could go see a movie that Jason has been chomping at.
Oh,
the
you
bit
too.
No, I'm not saying that I didn't want to go see it. No,
this is a we thing.
I know it's a we thing, but I would say that is much more your thing. Like, you've been dying to see it, whereas I've just been excited to see it.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, the movie is Dune Part 2, and I'm not endorsing movies on the podcast. This is obviously a faith-based podcast. It's not a movie review thing, but we've shared a lot about our movie love on here. And so I will just say that, be careful with what age you take to go see the movie. It is an intense movie. It's violent. There's a lot of action, lots going on, but we really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. It was great. Like, just not many movies come around like that anymore. And I think it was just such an experience.
Yes.
In so many ways.
Well, and
very cool.
What I would compare it to, and I think what many people would say it compares to, is it's like a very adult Star Wars. Basically.
Yes, with Lord of the Rings and other influences, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's deep and it's heavy. And I'll admit, we tried to listen to the first book. It's a whole series of books. You don't even know how many there are.
There's tons, a million, right? Of them, but anyway, that's another side
we couldn't even get through the whole thing on audiobook because it's so dense. But the part of the
really enjoyed it. It's just
it's really good. We just haven't made our way through that. Maybe on the next road trip. But
yeah.
Part of the reason why we like going to movies so much is that there's just so much to pick apart, so much to learn from. And I joked with Jason that our episode tonight was going to be based off Dune somehow. I'm like, oh, we're going to come out of there and feeling inspired, and that'll be what we podcast about, all about Dune, haha. But actually, the thoughts that we have tonight did kind of spring from watching Dune.
Yeah.
So do you want to give them a glimpse into what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So before you turn this off, because you're like, I don't want to listen to these guys talking about Dune for the next few minutes. No, that's not at all what we're talking about. They're loosely inspired. And so as part of the movie, you see the main character and his mom and a few others that kind of gain these, not necessarily supernatural, but enhanced abilities, and that make them more than just what they were. They're able to for example,
special gifts.
Yeah. Paul was able to be able to see future, and he was even called a prophet. That's one of his titles. And so it got us talking. We went and grabbed some dinner after, and we were just kind of chatting about how we, as children of heavenly parents, have literally divine potential, and even so much so that when we talk about gifts, like Allie just mentioned, it's not even, it is for later, for exaltation, but it's also right now we can hone in and develop even some of those qualities right now. And I think that's kind of the whole point, which we'll get to some more doctrinal basis for this in just a second. But part of, I think one of the whole point of us being here in this experience isn't to necessarily, for example, wait or just, someday I can't wait for the celestial kingdom. I'm just going to wait for heaven. I think kind of the point of the gospel is to create the celestial kingdom right now. Right now. Adam Grant wrote a book called An Early Resurrection, which kind of, it's the same idea. We don't have to wait, I think, to live a celestial life. And I was saying this to Allie on the way home, and I mean it genuinely. I'm excited for that day when I'm exalted and resurrected and have a body that's not going to get sick or whatever, and live in a even more beautiful place. But at the same time, I honestly can't imagine it being that. And I know it is. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But life with Allie and the family, and just even with its ups and downs, feels like heaven, feels like the celestial kingdom. But at the same time, we know that there's a whole lot more to it, because our heavenly parents are glorified. They are perfected and exalted in every way. And that anyway just got us talking about how that is our potential. And I think, and not even our potential, but our purpose in being here. Mm-hmm. And we kind of don't really talk about it that often.
Yeah, we're always talking in terms of the reward. Okay,
right.
So if I'm good, then I'll get this, and what we really should be focusing on is the whole process of what that actually means to become like God, to become like Jesus.
Yes.
And just how truly exciting that is.
Mm-hmm.
I think about, any number of movies that you've seen where there's usually some sage leader or professional in something, or a sports movie that takes on somebody that they're training. And then it's they usually invite this person to learn from them, but then they have to be really serious and committed to become like that person, you know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
and I feel like, well, obviously, I feel like it's no different with Jesus.
Yeah.
When we want to become like him, we have to take on a serious study of him, which reminded me of a week or so ago, we had a Sunday school lesson with the youth in our ward. Some of our local stake leaders came to put that on. And the question that they wanted everybody to think about in preparation for this meeting was, what does it mean to you to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? And like, who have you seen in your life that's a good example of being a disciple? But I wasn't called on to share my thoughts, but I'm grateful that that question was posed in advance, because it gave me an opportunity to reflect on that question for myself and how I would answer. And I learned a lot thinking about that one question, because I feel like so much of the time we've reduced that word disciple, down to I am a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like I'm just walking in a line behind him, you know? And sometimes it's even just like, oh, well, you just need to be a nice person and that's all you got to do. And that makes you like Jesus. And I'm obviously, that is an important part of being Christ-like. That is a very important part. Loving others, being kind. Yes, please. That is a hallmark of Christianity and of being his disciple. That's what he says in John 14:15, right? By this ye shall know, men shall know if ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. But that's just part of it. The word disciple actually has the same roots as the word discipline.
Yeah.
Meaning like to learn something.
I'm your student.
I'm your student. And that's exactly
Teach
what I wrote down in my notes here. It's like, I don't want to be his follower. I want to be his student.
Yeah.
Like a dedicated pupil of his.
Show me how you do what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that I can do it.
And the thing about it is like, why I think it is so hard sometimes to stick with that course of study is because it's rigorous.
Yeah.
It will put you through the ringer.
Yeah.
We shared a little bit about that. I mean, again, I don't want to overstate what we've gone through recently. We've obviously gone through some tougher times for us. I know that there are people that are suffering way more than we have, for sure. But that's all part of the program. That's all part of the course of study to become like him. And we may not even be aware that that's what we're doing so much of the time, but all of this has a purpose, and that purpose is to bring us closer to him. One of the quotes that came to mind that I remember reading this when I was in college. Actually, this was back in the days when we had for our lessons on Sunday were out of manuals called Teachings from the Living Prophets, and it would highlight specific past prophets. And that's what we would do the whole year, is study teachings from these prophets. And at the time, I was a 19-year-old. Was I 20? Maybe I was 19 or 20. I was very young. And I was tasked to teach the Relief Society in my home ward. So this was grown women, adult women, learning from this 20-year-old who knows nothing about life, right? And the study for that year was teachings of Spencer W. Kimball. And one of these lessons had to do with us becoming like God. I think it was maybe even one of the very first chapters in that book. But this sentence has always stuck with me. Spencer W. Kimball said, "Man is a God in embryo and has in him the seeds of godhood, and he can, if he will, rise to great heights." That is an exciting verse, or not verse, but an exciting quote to me. Like, if we will, we have everything inside us to become like God. We can rise to great heights. And we can't even think about what that truly means. What would be possible if we tapped into godhood? Think about everything that Jesus was able to do, even just here on this earth. And he's given us access to that. And Jesus knew how to study right. He was the star pupil, obviously, of Heavenly Father. And so he he aced everything and reached a very high level that none of us will attain in this life. But think about like the miracles and the things that ordinary people have been able to do in his name. And that's like really humbling to think about. And the cool thing is, it's not just some of us. It's every single person. Every single person has these same seeds of godhood in them.
Yeah. Well, it's like we've said before that, you know, you're every single person on this planet is one generation away from godhood. Like your heavenly parents are gods, and like it's them and then it's you. it's so close. And like the quote we've shared before, we're not just mortal beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a mortal experience while we're here. And the quote that Allie read from Spencer W. Kimball has been repeated by many prophets. President John Taylor said a very similar thing. And I love this quote. He says, "What is man? He had his being in the eternal worlds. He existed before he came here. He's not only the son of man, but he is the son of God also. He is a God in embryo and possesses within him a spark of that eternal flame, which was struck from the blaze of God's eternal fire in the eternal world, and is placed here upon the earth that he may possess true knowledge, true light, true knowledge, that he may know himself, that he may know God, that he may know something about what he was before he came here, and that he may know something about what he is destined to enjoy in the eternal worlds." It's beautiful stuff.
And I feel like we get glimpses of that sometimes. I see little like sparks of divinity in people. And it's even cool when you can see it in yourself sometimes, when you just have those moments where you do feel like, I don't know, does this happen to you? Maybe this is just me, where you have moments where you can almost like feel like you're full of something higher and something better than yourself is in there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
And I feel like we can see it all around us. We see it in beauty, not just like physical beauty, but just in being beautiful people and seeing people do beautiful things, the way they treat others, the talents that people have that you get to witness. That's why I get emotional sometimes when we go to like concerts or watch something on TV where someone is just displaying a talent. And I think it's because it's like, that is something divine in you. That is a God-given gift that you have, that it's on full display, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think we see this when we have like those moments of clarity and insight and other values like grace and courage and creativity and kindness, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of these things that we can see and observe, these are all little sparks of divinity. That's really cool to think about. And that's, nobody has all of it, right? As human beings, we're flawed, we're learning, we make a lot of mistakes, but it's in there. And sometimes we get little looks at it. And I don't know, I just really like that thought. I was telling Jason a couple weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast from someone who has recently left the church after being like a devoted member for several years. And anyway, it was kind of a bummer to listen to, honestly, like to hear this person's reasons for like why they stopped going to church. And one of the things that they cited was they were tired of going to a place where people just were repeating dogma over and over again, just repetitious do's and don'ts and blah, blah, blah. And that's all church was. And I just remember like listening to that and just being like, that's not what church is. Like, yeah, I can see why someone would reduce it down to that, and why they would choose to take that viewpoint, because it's easy to see that. If you're only looking surface level, sure, Like,
Yeah.
like you can sum it up that way if you want to. That's what church is. That's what going to the physical building is. Fine. But that's not what the gospel is. The gospel is expansive. If you let
Yes.
it, and if you truly, and this is why I feel like I have so much to learn and such a desire to just, you know, be a better student of the scriptures and of all of the books that are out there that are good and uplifting, because I have so much to learn and so many things to tap into that if I even had any idea, I think it would just blow my mind of what was out there. And there are obviously things that we're not going to know in this life. God's not going to reveal everything to us because I don't think we can handle it. I don't think our mortal brains can conceive of what he can, right? It's the Isaiah scripture of my thoughts are not your thoughts and my ways are higher than your ways.
Right.
But I do think it's cool though that we get little previews.
Yeah, I agree. And it makes me sad also when someone might just, just say that's all church is or what being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is. Like, don't slide into that. Like, and don't misunderstand. The purpose of the atonement of Jesus Christ and his grace is to help you become something.
That's exciting.
His commandments are not there to restrict you. His commandments, and that's almost a funny word to call them, but it's almost like he's not trying to like make you just do stuff so that he can like get mad at you when you don't do it and blah, blah. Like, in other words, he's basically saying like, look, I'm a perfected, glorified, resurrected being, exalted. I am a God. I'm all powerful. I have all things and I'm all loving. I am all of that. You want to know how I did it? Here's a guidebook. Here's the commandments. Here's how I live, in other words. Do this and you'll become like me, right? Like even going back to the movie tonight with Dune, like they're all like, you can't be our Messiah because you're an outsider. You're not Fremen. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I am Fremen because I've learned your ways. I'm one of you now, right? Like there's a great scene where he's literally in lockstep walking the way that a Fremen walks. Like they're indistinguishable from one another.
Footprints in the sand. Should we cue the
Please
poem?
don't. Cool. Please don't read
I had
that.
to.
But yeah, that's the idea is like walk in lockstep with me, like be my student, and it will be indistinguishable who is who at that moment because we all are gods. Jesus, I mean, how many scriptures? There's so many I could throw out there from Old Testament and New Testament from Jesus himself where he says, know ye not that ye are gods? Like right now, like think about, this is going deep and I don't want to spend too much time here, but if we really are eternal spirits, then our spirit kind of does exist without time. And I'm not saying that you are already a god, but at the same time, there is a lot of divinity in you. You're just in a mortal, decaying shell. But once that is gone, like it's 100% full divine and full godliness. And whether we choose to live up to that potential and live up to that degree of advancement is up to us, right? And he's never going to force us, but like, man, why wouldn't we? Like, that's the whole idea of this life is that we learn to taste that fruit of the tree for ourselves and say like, and I love what Isaiah said, like Jesus ate the butter and the honey, the good stuff, so that he would know to always choose the good. Sometimes we think like, oh, well, I got to taste the bad so I know how to prize and like that is all, I get that at the Adam and Eve and I totally do, but I think it's cool that with in reference to Jesus it was like we're here to learn how to just have the butter and honey. Come and try the butter and honey, like and you'll I think I really do believe like you'll see like yeah, there is nothing else better. I had a student just today like through teary eyes say something to the effect of like, look, I just don't know if I want this anymore. And I felt like saying, and maybe I should have, but I was like, it wasn't the time, but I was like, well, what's the alternative? what is the all there? Like you've got divinity in you. There's nothing else that's going to help that grow and develop like the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like that's its purpose. That's especially with its purpose with covenants. You think of the covenants that we make through baptism and the temple. That's the whole, especially, right? A sealed marriage. Like Heavenly Father, his name, and well, as he's referred to, is Elohim, but that's a plural word. That is a plural word. We're not talking just about him. We're talking about heavenly parents. And that's the whole idea of the covenants and commandments and the gospel of Jesus Christ is like, we're not here just to like check boxes and like, okay, I did it, Lord, or it's to become, right?
Well, it's funny. I promise we're not trying to like, we're not getting any kickback from Dune here, but I am going to pull up another Dune reference because there's a point in the movie when Paul, the main character, is told to understand your future, you have to understand your past. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about how in our pre-mortal lives, there was something about this existence, and you think about all of just the complete awful things out there in this world and the junk that people have to endure. There's other harsher words I could use that I won't, but there's some really messed up things that happen in this world that are not fair and they are not right, and there's so much suffering and so much pain, and yet something had to make it worth it. We all decided, everybody that came down here said, okay, I see what I'm up against, but it's worth it to me. I'm going to go through that to get to what is on the other side there.
Yeah.
And it was Jesus. It was Jesus who led the way. It was his plan.
Yep, exactly.
And we said, okay, Jesus, I will go down and I will do that, and I will be put through those awful things and lots of great things too. There's the honey as well.
Right.
It's not all bad stuff, but it was worth it to us to follow him. If we could become like him, learn what he learns, be as he is, we were willing to do it. And that is such an encouraging thought to me.
It's such a brilliant plan, because like here we are. And I think it was John Taylor also who said that we existed for eons of time before we were even born. And it must have been pretty great there with heavenly parents, with each other. But it also had some downsides. We didn't have a physical body, and we didn't have the ability to keep learning and making choices like that. It kind of like hit roadblock, right? We had to leave home and go to college, in a sense, spiritual college, away from mom and dad for the first time, which was great because we would get a body, but also then we'd also be separated from them through sin. And Jesus Christ solves both of those, right? When Jacob talks about the awful monster of death and of hell, of physical death and spiritual death, in other words, like it's only Jesus Christ that conquers both of those. And so we get to come and learn and make mistakes and strive to follow him. But all the while we know we're going to make mistakes. And so that Jesus Christ frees us from that. But it's his grace. Like we read about in Second Nephi as well, just it's his grace that saves us. Like Jesus Christ, he saves us. And in the end, the reward is the same as if the law had never been broken. And it's such an amazing plan. It's so brilliant. It's so cool that we get to learn and advance like he did, but also because of his atoning sacrifice, we get to walk in lockstep with him to the throne. And it's so cool. Like, I feel so undeserving, but that's just who Jesus is. That's who he is.
I keep using the word exciting, but that's all I can think of is just like, I want that so badly. I want to become like the greatest being that there ever was. And it's interesting because this whole idea of humans becoming like God has, I think church members, we catch a lot of flack for that from especially other Christians that are like, that's blasphemous because we believe in worshiping God. We don't believe that we are gods. So there's a lot of confusion out there about Latter-day Saint doctrine and what we really mean when we say that, because people forget that we still do worship, and we always will. We will always have God, the eternal Father, as our God, our one and only, right?
Yeah, right.
And that won't change even as we progress into the eons of eternity, however that works. I don't know how eternity is measured in time, but
yeah.
But that really it's just we want to become more like him, and we're not polytheists. We don't believe in multiple gods. It's different. But there's an essay for anyone that's listening to this and is scratching their heads and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. This sounds weird. The church put out an essay on this topic that is very helpful, and it's called Becoming Like God. And man, if we had time, we could just read the entire thing on here, but we don't.
I do want to share several paragraphs from it, though, because it is really, there's a lot of it. It's really
good. I was going to read a little bit.
Yeah, you go ahead.
As well. The part that I pulled out in going along with this whole idea of us being gods in embryo, they quote, whoever wrote this essay quotes Joseph Smith at a sermon that he gave at the funeral of a man named King Follett. A lot of people are familiar with this because this was not too far off from the time when Joseph was martyred. Mm-hmm. It was within, I think it was 3 months later or so, yeah, is when he would die. So his time on this earth was quickly approaching an end. And I can only imagine there were so many things that Joseph just wanted to get out to people and let them know before he was going to be on the other side, you know?
Yeah.
And he says, what kind of a being is God? If men do not comprehend the character of God, they do not comprehend themselves. And then he goes on to say, Joseph told the assembled saints, you have got to learn how to be a God yourself. In order to do that, the saints needed to learn godliness, or to be more like God. The process would be ongoing and would require patience, faith, continuing repentance, obedience to the commandments of the gospel, and reliance on Christ. Like ascending a ladder, individuals needed to learn the first principles of the gospel and continue beyond the limits of mortal knowledge until they could learn the last principles of the gospel when the time came. It is not all to be comprehended in this world, Joseph said. It will take a long time after the grave to understand the whole. That was the last time the prophets spoke in a general conference. 3 months later, a mob stormed Carthage jail and martyred him and his brother Hiram. There you go. I feel like if this was like Joseph's last lecture of sorts, that's the topic he wanted to get out there. This is why you're here. This is the whole point.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Don't lose sight of this. Catch a vision for what is possible and what awaits you if you are willing to stay true and faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ and his teaching.
Yeah. In that same essay, Joseph Smith again, and I think it was, I'm not sure if it was in that same sermon, but he said, oh no, in a revelation recorded in July 1843 that linked exaltation with eternal marriage, the Lord declared that those who keep covenants, including the covenant of eternal marriage, will inherit all heights and depths. Then, says the revelation, shall they be gods, because they have no end, and they will receive a continuation of the seeds forever and ever. Oh, it's just so good. Lorenzo Snow, the church's 5th president, he was the one who said this famous phrase, which I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard, as man now is, God once was. And as God now is, man may be. I mean, how many prophets do we need to say the same thing? Like, this is published. This is doctrine. This is like super, like Ali said, exciting and inspiring and humbling doctrine. Like, this is well, here we are, President Oakes as well. He wrote, "Our theology begins with heavenly parents. Our highest aspiration is to be like them." That's the whole purpose. I mean, some reframing might be needed on our end to just understand why the gospel of Jesus Christ, but that's a huge part of it, obviously. Another part of this essay that I loved said, "A cloud and harp are hardly a satisfying image for eternal joy. Although most Christians would agree that inspired music can be a tiny foretaste of the joy of eternal salvation. Likewise, while few Latter-day Saints would identify with caricatures of having their own planet, most would agree that the awe inspired by creation hints at our creative potential in the eternities." Oh, it's so good. Latter-day Saints tend to imagine exaltation through the lens of the sacred in mortal experience. They see the seeds of godhood in the joy of bearing and nurturing children and the intense love they feel for those children, in the impulse to reach out in compassionate service to others, in the moments they are caught off guard by the beauty and order of the universe, in the grounding feeling of making and keeping divine covenants. Church members imagine exaltation less through images of what they will get and more through the relationships they have now and how those relationships might be purified and elevated. As the scriptures teach, that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among us there. Only it will be coupled with eternal glory, which glory we do not now enjoy. Oh, man.
There's so much there to dive into, so much depth. And I do want to stress that too, that the point of becoming like him, it's not for our own glory, and it's not just so we can like stare down at others and be like, ha ha, I'm better than you because I'm like God. Don't you wish you were like me? That's not what this is about at all. Because if we're truly like him, then we will be filled with that perfect love that he says is that true quality of his disciples, right? We will be perfect in loving others. And that's why we do the work that we do. That's why we want everybody in on this. We want everybody to experience this chance of becoming like God.
Yeah.
And of course our family relationships, our friend relationships, all of that mean everything to us. And why do we feel so strongly that in this life? Those are our strongest pulls, our strongest ties in this earth. It's because like that's the most important thing to us. And so it follows that in the next life, it will continue to be the most important thing to us.
Yeah.
And so that's why I share the gospel with people. That's why we do this podcast. That's why we're just trying the best that we can to learn and grow and stumble and fall and get better and repent and all of that, because there is a purpose to it. We love the Lord and we love our family and friends, our neighbors. We want this for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, let's be good people, but let's not only be that, let's be godly.
Yeah.
Let's be godly people.
Because think about all the good, it's like the whole money concept thing, right? It's being a rich person is not a bad thing. It's what you do with that money. And Jason and I often talk about how we wish that we had more money, not so we can like go buy stuff, but so we could have more ability to help people, you know? I love it when people that are well-to-do are out there like starting foundations or contributing to charities. And, you know, those are just some small examples, but I love the thought that if I develop a godlike skill, it's not for me. It's so that I can be a blessing to others around me. You know, like
100%.
the ability to, again, in the movie, Paul has the ability to like see into the future. He has glimpses of things that are going to happen that give him some insights into what's coming. And we actually believe that that is a spiritual gift among many spiritual gifts that God can bestow. He can give you the gift of revelation, the gift of prophecy, like there's no limit to what he can open your eyes and your mind and your heart to do. And think about what a blessing that would be for you and for your family and for everyone around you if you had that ability.
Yeah. Well, Joseph, I mean, we've talked a little bit about spiritual gifts on this podcast before, but I mean, Joseph said that we should seek after all the gifts. Some of us have ones, obviously, that are come very naturally to us. And we know that. I don't just believe it. We know that God's given us each specific gifts, but he encourages us to develop them all, what are all those gifts? Those are just godly attributes. Yeah. They're the attributes of God. And we can seek after them now. And we should, prophets have said, seek after them right now. Why not? Why not? We don't want to wait to go to heaven. Let's bring heaven down on here. Like just pull it on down. And we see that in just the kind things that we do. We see that in our wards and our families and our neighborhoods. And I saw it today at Brighton when they had a basketball game where the special needs kids played, and to see just the whole school turn out and support, and so many kids, even players from the University of Utah basketball and football teams were there playing along with the kids. And it was like, it was heaven. It was heaven. And I actually said to my 5th period institute class, to those seniors, I was like, do you think that basketball game, that assembly would have gone any different if Jesus himself were here? And the kids just kind of shook their head. No. And I agree. Like, that's the good stuff. We can pull heaven down on this earth. We don't have to necessarily wait for it. And it's just going to come by just following him, hearing him and heeding his words, and just keeping that perspective in mind. Like, we're not here just to check boxes. We're not here just to go through the motions or hear repeated dogma or doctrine at church each week or whatever you want to say. We're in a process of becoming and growing. And that is a long process. Joseph Smith said, when you climb a ladder, you got to start at the bottom, work your way to the top. And he even said, it'll be a long time even after you've passed through the veil so you can share that full quote. Yeah, I think
I already did.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm saying it again. Sorry. But, it's a process. And anyway, this just came to my mind just now. Like, we love the Great British Baking Show, but Prue, a couple months back, she posted on her Instagram account about this tree that she wanted to plant. And it takes like 11 years or something to even just produce its first flower. And, but you got to take care of it like that whole time. And she was just saying, like, I hope it blooms before I die or something like that. But these things just take time. And sometimes the growth is imperceptible, but it is happening. And again, when we're walking with Jesus, like, show me, let me be your student. And we do that over and over and over and over again. The growth happens at 100%. And it's gradually, but someday you will wake up and be like, how did I get here? And it's through Jesus Christ, his gospel, and his atoning sacrifice.
Very well said. I just want to end with a challenge, I guess, to people listening, that you look for that in your lives. Look for those sparks of divinity and the things that are showing you that you are becoming like God, that you already have that in you. And you might feel it in all sorts of different places. You might feel it while you're out for a run, or when you're reading a book with your kids, or when you're studying really hard for that test that's coming up, or when you have to perform or do something really hard, or when you're going through a rough trial. Think about that godlike embryo that you are. You have the seeds of divinity in you, and he's with you. He will help you strengthen that and grow that. And as Jason said, it takes time. We certainly don't know everything ourselves. We're learning just like you, but I am very excited to keep doing that, to keep becoming like him, learning of him, studying him, all of it.
Me too. Well, thank you all for listening. We really, really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, as always, sharing this podcast with someone who could benefit from it. And also, if you don't mind rating and subscribing to it, that just helps it show up to more people. And again, not that it's about us at all. This is just about him. And so if our testimonies can help more of Jesus Christ and his restored gospel get out there in the world, then that's what we want to do. So we thank you for your support, and especially for your love and for your friendship. We really do feel that, and we always love hearing from you, so don't be shy about reaching out. Until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you.